All right. Oh, composer. John Williams. He's a composer, but you see him conducting.
I'm sorry, we have construction going on next door. I didn't anticipate anyone continuing to work this evening.
We'll get you muted here. All right. Unmute yourself if you can, if you need to talk to us. All right. So this is a composer who is also conducting his composer. So I don't know why the logo is a conductor with the baton and everything, but whatever. They're often the same people. So Composer is similar to other dependency managers. You may have heard of, like, if you're in the Linux world, Yum or apt or brew or macports or npm or pip, or pretty much every language for framework seems to have their own package manager. The reason for this is to help manage what's called dependency hell, and that's what's happened back in the day before we had package managers, when you'd have a piece of software that would require all sorts of other dependencies. So, one library requires another library, requires another library. And, that can vary by project. And, having a computer actually figure out those dependencies for you, rather than having to manually go out and find each piece of library or software that's compatible with each other. Having the computer do that for you is definitely a time saver. Which way are we going here? Come on. All right. So in Drupal 8, we've adopted Composer. And Composer is actually a project of the larger PHP community. And when Drupal 8 decided to go with Symfony as a basis for developing, it made a lot more sense to get even further off the island and adopt Composer for development. And since we've started using Composer, Drupal has contributed back fixes and improvements to the Composer project that benefits other projects like WordPress or Joomla or whatever other PHP projects that use Composer. So things are getting better as time goes on. Back a year or two ago, using Composer is like, I have no clue what's going on here, and it can't do this or it can't do that. How do I make the modules go where they're supposed to go? And it's now gotten a lot more mature. So yeah, it's kind of a mutually beneficial arrangement. So usually, at least the way we built websites back in the Drupal 7 days, is that we were building a Drupal site. So you started with Drupal. And then you had modules, which you added as dependencies for your site. So ctools or views would require ctools. And usually Drush could take care of that, but it wasn't very good at taking care of like version number dependency. So if you required a certain version of a module, Drush didn't do that for you. And Drush wasn't designed to do that. So you were kind of stuck in kind of a dependency hell. And so that's kind of another reason why we adopted Composer. Which way are we going? There we go. So when we're using Composer, we're thinking more of, we're not building a Drupal site, we're building a PHP project. And that PHP project requires Drupal. And then Drupal requires Symfony and 100 other dependencies that are available out in the PHP community and the Drupal community. And so you can also add your own dependencies for, views or token. CTools isn't required here, but you can still use Composer in Drupal 7 if you really wanted to. Okay, let's see here. Here's a real quick overview on how to get Composer installed on your machine. The documentation at getcomposer.org is really, really good. And it's gotten better over the months or year or so that I've been trying to look at them. And it's really pretty easy because Composer is just a file. It's a phar file, P-H-A-R. It's kind of like a zip archive of PHP code, and it's kind of a self-contained executable. So you just put that Composer phar file somewhere in an executable directory. So here I'm putting it in user local bin Composer. And I don't know if, yeah, and then there's nothing else after that. And then you make sure that you can add other Composer stuff to your path from your home folder. This is probably a little optional because you can add other global applications for Composer if you wanted to. And the nice thing about Composer is that Composer is used to update your projects. So Composer can update itself. And it's very easy. I did this morning when I was like, oh, I should probably be running the latest version of Composer if I'm going to demo something. So all you have to do is type Composer self-update if you were, it's been a long time. You can get the latest update. And it also has a rollback feature for that too. So, and when you run it, it'll tell you how to roll it back if it fails miserably, which I've never seen it do yet. So crossing fingers, knocking on wood. All right. So starting a project with Drupal. So there's a nice project out there on GitHub called the Drupal Composer Drupal project. And this is let's call it a Kickstarter Composer configuration to start a new Drupal 8 website. They also have a branch for Drupal 7, but I don't know how well maintained that is. I've never used it. But what you can do here is we'll run the Composer command. And then there's create project, which is a special Composer command that will do a whole bunch of stuff for you. So in this case, it will create a directory and clone or copy some files in and run Composer install and all that stuff. And it'll get you a working Drupal project right off the bat. And then here we're defining Drupal Composer, which is the organization. And then Drupal project is the name of the project. The :8x-dev is the version that we want to get. This is not the Drupal core version, okay? So there isn't any releases on this project, so 8x-dev just says use the 8x branch in its development. Where are we? And then we define a directory. So you'd replace some dir with my site or something like that. Stability dev. I just copy and pasted this from the README, so I think the reason for that is that there's no actual releases for this project. And then no interaction says if there's any prompts, just go with the defaults. And so as soon as you hit that, boom, it goes through and does a whole bunch of stuff. So let's go do that. Let's see here. All right, so first thing is I go to their project page. Drupal Composer, Drupal project. It's on GitHub. If you search for Drupal Composer on Google, you'll get here real fast. It's so popular. And you just scroll down and you find, oh, there's the command I need. I'm just going to copy that. Go into my terminal here. Paste that in, and I want to change some directory to my site. Oh, wait, hold on, let's not do that here. My laptop's a little wonky right now, so I need to SSH into somewhere. All right, so we're going to change this to, so I'm in my sites directory, which is where I have my hosting. So what did I call my site? And so you can see it starts doing stuff, and it's cloning, it's installing a Drupal project, it's cloning some Git repository, it's running some scripts, and it's checking up with all the dependencies and figuring out what version of what to get and where to get it. So this can take a while and can be memory intensive. So you may have to like update your max PHP limit, and yeah, I'm not going to cover that in this because that's a lot of extra overhead.
But I did have to do that. I think I went to 3 gig on mine to make sure that worked.
Yeah, get the
I went-
latest version of Composer if you can and try again. But yeah, like 1 gig or 2 gigs or 3 gigs.
I think 1.5 is what it was defaulting to,
Yeah,
and it was running out. And
yeah,
I went to 2 and it was running out, so I went to 3.
yeah. It can get pretty complicated. Oops, let's go back to the keynote. So I went out and got a whole bunch of things. So where did it get all this stuff from? Well, the first part was when we defined the Drupal Composer, Drupal project part. How did it know to look at GitHub and this repository for all that stuff? Well, this project is registered on Packagist, which is a repository, not a Git repository, or at least, you don't work with it like a Git repository. It's a repository of, it's a database of projects, and people can publish their packages up there and tell it, hey, my project is on GitHub over here. You add a Composer JSON to your project, and this thing will read it and make it available for Composer to find. So we got other repositories too. Drupal.org has their own repository, packages.drupal.org. They actually have 2 repositories, I think. They have if you put a /8 on the end of this URL here, that's the Drupal 8 repository. If you put a /7, that's the Drupal 7 repository. And then you could also do your own private repositories if you need to have, locally sourced private code that's should only stay inside, your organization. And as with any other public package manager, we have a warning. And that is, make sure you get trusted stuff out of here. There's been a few things happen, like especially in NPM, the node package management, where somebody had a falling out with the philosophy of what NPM was doing or whatever, so they pulled all their projects out, and one of their projects was LeftPad. And because he pulled it out, everything that uses the LeftPad library broke, or at least their builds broke. The applications are probably still running because it's already been downloaded, but you couldn't deploy again because you couldn't download the dependency. And yeah, that was a kerfuffle. And then there's also another project from, I forget what project it was. It was a fairly popular library that the maintainer is just like, oh, you know, some random guy came to the project and said, hey, I'd be willing to help you maintain this project. It looks like it hasn't moved for a long time. And it's like, oh, great, somebody can help me. You know, that person wasn't a very trustworthy person. As soon as he got access to the repository, he added some Bitcoin mining and stealing code to the project. And of course, once people built new, you know, made new builds that included this project, all of a sudden, you know, hundreds or thousands of sites started mining Bitcoins or whatever. So the Drupal.org code is pretty well reviewed because there is a process for handing off project maintainership, and we have a security team that looks through all this stuff. So that's pretty trustworthy. And the few projects that Drupal uses out of Packagist are pretty robust and well vetted by the community. So just a little warning. All right, we're done building. Actually built faster than we thought. But what do we get? We get some directories here. Where's my mouse? Where'd my mouse go? Slow mouse. Go back. All right, whatever. We get a gitignore file. We get a composer.json and a composer.lock file. And we get a web directory with all the actual Drupal core modules, you know, the stuff that looks familiar to a Drupal person. You can see we also got Drush for free. So we've got Drush sitting there. And we got some environment variable loader. So if we need environment variables to load up into our code, we can use that. Oh, hey, we can actually see what's going on here. All right. So let's take a look at this composer.json file. So as most people should be familiar with the JSON file format. Yeah, it's not YAML. So you really have to pay attention to things like not putting that comma on the last item of a list. That always gets me. Normally through the course of whatever, you don't really have to edit this file very much. If you're doing something more than just adding or updating dependencies, then you'll probably go in here and muck around a bit. So we're starting off with the basic information. We got the name, which is Drupal Composer, Drupal project, which you see is the org/project name. A description, the type we'll get to in a little bit, but that's just a project. We can define licenses. We can define authors. We can define websites. We can, you know, put a whole bunch of information, meta information about the project. You know, where's documentation or where's support, that sort of stuff. And there is a composer command to validate this file. So if you're actually mucking around in here, you can run composer validate and make sure you didn't do something stupid like put that comment in there or forget a curly brace somewhere or, you know. So that's those things. Here we define third-party repositories. So here we're saying, hey, we're going to use the Drupal 8 Composer repository so that we can manage dependencies from Drupal.org. And here's the nice part where we require, stuff. So these are the things that we want to add to this project. And I think for the most part, it's there in alphabetical order, it looks like. But you can see inside that list, there's Drupal/core, Drupal/console. So we're getting Drupal core from the Drupal repository. We're getting Drupal console from the Drupal repository. We're getting Drush from the Drush repository. So apparently Drush has it up on Packagist. And we got a few other helpful things, such as Composer installers, which allows you to run some scripts before, during, and after you install packages. Composer patches is nice. We'll get to that. And then Composer does have a idea of doing development environments. So if you're ambitious enough to separate some stuff out, you can do things like, say, when you do a Composer install, you can do like a -- dev flag on it, and it will install development modules. So you can say you can put devel in there. So if every time you want to build as a development, as opposed to in your deployment to production, you can have devel in there. If you notice, the versioning has little carets in them, and there's a nice little, we'll talk about how it manages version numbers, but here we're looking at, Composer installers, you're getting version 1.2 or greater in the 1.x branch. So you can add these from the command line, so that you don't really need to edit this part very often. That's that. And I'm going to skip over a whole bunch of other stuff that, you can see up there. There's some install commands and post update commands and all that stuff. But the next part that you'd probably want to look at is the extra stuff, which configures the behavior of certain plugins and stuff. So you can actually extend Composer to do other things. So remember, we had the patch, the Composer patch. That has configuration. So you can say patch level is at P2 because we're in the web directory, right? And we can configure installer paths. So you can say, okay, if a project identifies itself as type Drupal core, put it in the web/core folder. If it says it's a Drupal library, put it in web libraries and whatever the name of that library is. And so this is the part where it's putting the Drupal modules where you expect the Drupal modules to go, which is nice. For custom modules, I might have another line in here that's like web modules /ISU/ bracket $name, and the type would be like ISU module. And then if I define that as an ISU module, it will go in the right spot. Drupal scaffold. Is a, let's see here. That part is for things like index.php, htaccess, all those things that are in the web root of a Drupal installation that, sometimes, you edit yourself. So like htaccess, you're going to edit. So in this Drupal scaffold, you can manage how that works. You can say, when you update Drupal, don't automatically update the htaccess file because we have important stuff in there. Or here it is copying editor config and git attributes to the root of the project so that Git can read the Git attributes if you initialize a Git repo down there. So there's a lot of stuff in there. The other file you get is a composer.lock file. Do not edit this file manually. Do not edit this file manually. So as we saw in Composer JSON, we could define versions in a kind of fuzzy way. Instead of exact numbers, we can say, oh, we can do anything, the latest in the 1x branch or the 2x branch or whatever. And the composer.lock file is, after you install and get all that stuff, it locks down those versions. So that every time you do a Composer install, you're getting the exact same code every time. Because can you imagine if every time you built it, there's an update to one of the dependencies and things move out from underneath you? So that's what this is for. This references in kind of is a cache of keeping together what files and references were downloaded and installed. And so normally you'll add this to your Git repository if it's a project, like a website or something. And then that way all the developers have all the same versions of everything. There's there's possibilities for getting Git merge conflicts in here. A lot of some of the stuff that you see in there is like content hash. So it hashes different things at different places. And so if you add something or remove something to the file, like you add another dependency, another module, that hash is going to change. And then if somebody else comes along and adds, and then you try to merge it, you got one line that adds a hash and they're both different and you don't know what to do. So there's this website or this page that kind of walks you through how to solve that conflict. Of course, these slides will be up on the groups.drupal.org node afterwards. So we also got a git ignore file. If we look closely here, we're ignoring a few folders. We're ignoring the drush commands. We're ignoring a vendor folder. We're ignoring core. We're ignoring modules and themes and profiles and libraries. We used to commit all that stuff. We're not going to commit any of this? That's right. Because every time you build it, you're going out and getting it fresh. And so you don't have to pollute your own Git repository with all these extra files and have these huge Git commits that are like 1 billion files for when you update Drupal. So when you update Drupal, you got 2 files that change. You got your composer.json and your composer.lock. So we're ignoring these folders because we can always get that information. So we did our stuff here, right? We got, oops, all right, here we are. Let's go and see my site here. And we see what we have here. Yeah, I'll do a little. This maker, we're making a config sync folder here. There's an issue on there that, I don't know, it only seems to happen to me, but you need to have that folder there in order to install Drupal. So I don't know why the project hasn't gone through that, but now we can go to our website here and you can see we got a working Drupal installation. So I'm going to choose to continue anyway. The warning is opcode caching, which I don't care about on a local environment. So while all that's going, let's go back to Keynote here. And what's the next thing? Okay, how do we install modules? We got a Drupal site. I want the token module. Composer require Drupal token. That's all you need to do. Pretty easy. You'll notice that I didn't define a version here. So what this is going to do is it's going to go out and get the latest of whatever. So if there's a 2x branch, it'll get the latest of the 2x branch. If there's a 1x branch and a 2x branch and a 3x branch, it'll get the latest of the 3x. So you can define the version by using the little syntax here. The caret there says, get the latest stable version according to semantic versioning. Drupal.org does not use semantic versioning yet. You get version 1.5, not 1.5.0. With semantic versioning, you have major, minor, patch version numbers. And so there's kind of a little workaround that the Drupal.org repository does, and it just adds a .0 at the end of that. So you'll see sometimes you'll have the caret, or you'll see the tilde, which allows only the last digit to go up. So normally that would mean the patch version. And I think the way it works right now is that if it's a Drupal project, it might end up just kind of being the same thing, because the last digit is 1.5, right? So yeah, I usually go with the caret because that's what everything else uses. You can have other constraints such as greater than or less than or greater than and equal to, and you can even do a wildcard. So if you want, the minor version of a project to be anything, but you only want every other patch release or something like that, you can probably do something weird like that. There's a good documentation on how to manage version numbers on the Composer documentation.
Does it understand released versions and dev versions, or like it?
So other examples. So in this example here, we got token. We're going to say it's going to be version 1.5 to 1 point whatever is a valid version. For simple FB Connect, it's anything in the 3.0 to 3 point whatever. C tools, we're getting specifically 3.0 alpha 26. So I think that answers your question about alpha. So if you're looking at a beta version or whatever.
No, my question was, if there's a release version of 1.5, but there's a develop or a dev version of 2.0, and I don't specify a version number, is it going to get the latest version, which is 2.0?
Oh, it
Or,
should
or
get
is
the,
it going to get the latest?
it should get the 1.x, whatever is the latest in the 1.x, because
Because that's released.
yeah, there's like some sort of stability attribute somewhere that handles that. So that's been my experience with that.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe
Good.
worth double checking when you get there. Like, oh, yeah.
I thought that's the way it worked, but I wanted to verify that.
Right. So like if you wanted a dev version, because I mean it's going to be like a 2.0 dash dev, right?
Right.
And so it will always prefer something that doesn't have that dash dev or dash alpha or whatever. That's like further down on the list. If there's no other choice, it might get, the 1x dev.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And it does have some sort of hierarchy for alpha, beta, and stuff like that. It's in the documentation somewhere, but it makes sense. And some really smart people figured it out. Oh, I'm going to let them deal with it and make sure I get the right version when I do add weird modules like that. So yeah, here we're getting alpha 26 of C tools, and we're getting the dev version of token. If we want to get the dev version of token, we define it this way. So let's go ahead and install token and see how that looks. So here we are. So we do Composer, require, Drupal, token. So we're getting it from the Drupal board, and token is the name of the module. And it should be pretty easy because token really doesn't depend on anything else, but it's going to go and take a look and make sure things are okay. And so you see it says using version 1.5, and you can see it updated your Composer JSON for you. And then it looks all the stuff and says, okay, let's install it. And as you do this, a lot on your own machine, it does have a cache. So if it's like you're going and grabbing 1.5 version of token like all the time, it's sitting there locally in your cache. So you don't have to always be continuously downloading all this stuff, because the first time it runs, it's going to take forever. Subsequent runs, it doesn't take quite as long.
So if you want to figure out what version of module you have, then you can do that. Like if you had a version, like you're just like, I forgot what version or you want to check.
I'm sure there's a command to do that. I've never really looked. I mean, you can look in the modules directory and at the info YAML file, but
You can look in the
Yeah.
composer.json file and it will tell you,
well,
it'll have tilde 1.5. in
right,
there.
but then you could, if it says tilde 1.5, you could have 1.6 or 1.9 or 1.22. What is the source of what file is there is in the composer.lock file. And that's not really easy to read.
No,
so
that was
I
more
would just go to the
confusing.
module itself and see what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a composer command that's like composer list whatever, and it'll say something.
Try doing composer info.
Yeah,
and
there
then,
you go.
and then your there you go.
Yep. So composer info and the name of the project.
Is that?
Yep. And it tells you where it got it from, where it downloaded it from, where it's installed. So yeah, that's pretty nice. Yeah.
I didn't mean to take us into the weeds. I was just trying to
That was that was a good question though. I hadn't thought about that. It was like, all right, so we saw that Composer JSON and Composer lock were updated, and we're all good and good. So if we go into web modules, we got our contrib folder, and there's our token. So we got all the token files. Excellent. Let's go back to where, okay, so updating. Composer update. Try not to run that without specifying a package. Yeah, because if you do Composer update, enter, it'll try to update everything. And sometimes that's kind of not what you want to do. Because if you have a whole bunch of out-of-date things, you're going to be like, okay, it's something broke.
A lot changed. What broke it?
Yeah, what happened? All of a sudden, there's like a big PHP notice on the homepage. Like, what's going on? What update actually killed that? So I very much do not like running Composer update plain. So, like, if you want to update Drupal, it's Composer update Drupal/core. And then there's other options in there because core is kind of weird, and we'll get to that. But when updating modules, you say Composer update, Drupal/token, And then we have this dash dash with dependencies. So in case the dependencies on token have updated, hey, you should go out and get those updates as well. And here is how you update Drupal core. So
So if you don't specify with dependencies,
you'll just
does
get
it
the,
break? Like if
it could,
project's moved along and you've got the old dependencies there.
yeah.
So-
I don't understand why that isn't the default,
Right.
but
Yeah,
it should be the default, I thought, but I've gotten the habit of saying with dependencies, and maybe now, that is default. I don't know.
so there's a couple extra things here. What are those?
Yep. So let's see here. We got Drupal core, and then we got this Webflow Drupal core required dev. And when we saw that, that was in the dev requirements. So if you're developing, I don't know what exactly that's for, but it doesn't normally get installed unless you're adding the dev flag. But I think that's for extra code for developing Drupal or something, like tests or something. And then we got Symfony, so we're going to update all the Symfony projects. That's been the last few releases of Drupal, major releases of Drupal, not major, minor releases of Drupal. Updated some Symfony stuff, and it was easier just to say update all of Symfony stuff when you update Drupal. Because I don't know why core didn't have that dependency, right, or whatever, but just to be
Yeah.
sure, we're doing it that way now. That got added after that fiasco. And then, of course, with dependencies, so all the Drupal dependencies, we'll get it all.
Okay, so basically this is updating Drupal core is a package.
Right?
The Webflow slash whatever is another package that it's
Mhm.
so it's updating.
3 packages.
Yeah, well,
Yep.
Symphony could be many, but
Yeah, several.
you're
Packages.
specifying 3 things
Right.
with a wild card.
Yep.
Okay.
I can never remember this off the top of my head, but a good way to find it. I'll show you here. You go to this Drupal Composer project again, where we got that command for how to install it.
Okay.
You scroll down here. Oh, here's instructions on updating Drupal core. There it is. Copy paste. So anytime that they need to update that, like, oh, maybe we need to put something else in there, that gets updated pretty quickly if there's issues. They also have a few other recommendations, like after you run, double check, the what are called the scaffold files, index.php and robots text and all that stuff, that if you had any changes in those files, it would show up as, changed in your Git repository if you had it in Git. And so it offers a little bit of advice on how to deal with some of the stuff.
Okay, and if I remember right from the composer.json file, for Drupal core, it says like 8.6.0.
Yes.
So,
But there's a caret in front of it.
yeah, so that means that it will
It will-
update 8.6 point whatever the patch level is.
Right.
But it won't update to 8.7 until you specifically tell it to go to 8.7. Is that
believe
my
so.
understanding?
Yeah. Huh.
Sorry to put you on the spot. That's the way I understood it, but I want to verify.
Yeah, so Caret is the latest stable version according to semantic versioning. And tilde allows only the last digit to go up. So that might actually bring in 8.7. Oh no, because you defined the 6 there. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I've always, when I've done it, I've defined, it's a Drupal update core command. So I don't think I had to actually tell it 8.6 or 8.5. I just ran that command.
Okay.
And so I got the latest, and then it probably updated the Composer JSON too to say 8.7 or 6 or whatever. All right, where was I? All right, so we got, always go back to this project for how to update core, and you'll be good. All right. Really? Are we there yet? All right, Git. So we had all this stuff in the Git ignore. So let's take a look at how this kind of works in a workflow of, all right, we're putting our project in a Git repository. How do I get the stuff that Bob was working on, and how does Bob get the stuff that I was working on, and all that stuff? Like what's kind of that flow? Like what commands do I need to know from Composer in order to get stuff, or what do I need to put in my build script? I made a shell script to do this stuff for me, and it depends on your environment and stuff, how to do this, or when and what commands to run. So we'll take a look at how Git works here. Now, if I can find my little instructions here. All right, so we have our project here. We'll do a Git status. It's not a Git repository. So we'll do a Git init. And we got a new Git repository. And then we see nothing in there, no commits yet. Everything is untracked. So I'll just add everything and commit it. All right, so we got all that. We'll, push it up the bit bucket or whatever. So we got this, we got token. I kind of want to show you what it looks like when you install a module. So let's install the redirect module. So Composer, require Drupal. Composer require Drupal redirect. So it's finding version 1.3. It updated my Composer JSON file. It's checking the dependencies, making sure nothing else doesn't like it, I think is probably what it's checking here. And then it's putting the files in where we want it. And then it's writing the lock file, and we're good. So now when I do a git status, it's just the two files, the JSON file, the lock file. So git diff. We'll see the difference is, well, it just added that one line. Great. That's pretty easy. How about, what did the lock file do? Well, you see here the content hash changed, and that's where we're always going to get those merge conflicts. So if I added this module in one branch and Bob added, I don't know, path auto in another branch, and then we tried to merge these two, that line's going to conflict. And
Yep.
Yeah. So that's always a headache. The best thing to do is somebody has to, whoever got it into development first wins. And then whoever has, added it later has to merge in their, merge in development into their feature branch, and then re-add the module. So,
The rest of this stuff could conflict as well because it's adding new lines there right after the description Drupal.
oh yeah, yeah, and where the commons are and stuff, it could
Yeah.
make an invalid file. and-
Yeah, so it looks to me like there's a lot of
Yeah, so
opportunity for
don't
merge
try to
conflicts.
manually resolve that conflict. Just do it over again.
Mhm.
Um, so we can see here now, okay, here's the mechanical information about what we have installed. It added 130. Here's the Git URL and what reference, that's a tag. If you want to download a zip file, it's there. Here's a checksum, so no man in the middle did anything stupid with it, all that stuff. And there's some extra stuff in here if you wanted. I think a lot of this is Drupal.org specific stuff. So like security covered, and all the licensing, all that fun stuff, and who are the maintainers and all that stuff. So that all gets cached up here and is good for go. All right, so where were we? So I'm gonna go somewhere else and clone the repository as if I'm Bob. So I'm gonna go here. So I'm making another folder here. So git clone. I'm gonna call it my site. So you can do local git clones if you didn't know that. You can clone with file URLs instead of like SSH or HTTP.
Mhm.
It's kind of nice sometimes for demo purposes. So we do a git status here. Like, okay, we got all this stuff. We got all the files we want. All right. But when we go here, we go to the web folder and we go to modules. Where's my contrib folder? Where are all my modules? Where's all this code that I thought I had? Remember these were in a git ignore file. So what do? Let's bring it all back in. Let's go back to the root of the project because Composer likes to work down there. It's getting better at this. Sometimes it'll ask, hey, do you want to use it in this folder?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, that's a lot better than what it used to be. And we'll do Composer install. And it goes and it's grabbing all that stuff. It really quickly read the lock file and it's just getting that stuff and putting it where it needs to be. Awesome. All right. Git status. If I can type it right. Update, nothing there. Awesome. But now we actually got all the code we need. So if we're cd web modules, there's the contrib folder. There's the token module. Oh, I forgot to
You didn't
the redirect module.
you
right?
didn't add it and commit it.
Nope. Yeah, that's actually in my script, so we're okay. All right, so let's go back and add that. So we're going to go back to my repository and do a git status. Okay, there they are. Let's git add these guys. Yep, and then this is when you push blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Add git commit, and let's go back. Now we do a git pull. Whoops. And we see we got Composer lock and Composer JSON.
Yep.
But we still haven't got the module, right? Because
Right.
we just got the meta information.
Yep.
So Composer install. Oh, hey, there's a redirect thing. Bloop, there it is. web modules contrib. There's your redirect module. Excellent. So does that make sense? So that's kind of the workflow that you do. It's like every time you bring in, pretty much every time you do a git pull, you should probably do a composer install. Most of the time my workflow is just like load away and start from scratch again. But you know, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I kind of see doing a composer install at
That's at the
at the
deployment.
same point where previously when I was doing everything in Git, I would do a Git submodule.
Oh
update.
yeah. In place of git
I
submodule
kind of see
update.
those as being doing similar things,
Right.
going out and pulling
Yeah, and
extra code.
there is some gotcha with git submodules. If you're a lot of these things, when it brings in the dependency, will bring in, you know, a .git folder, a Git repository with it, right? Because that's how it's distributed, is as a Git repository.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not ignoring those folders in your Git ignore, Git will sometimes might get confused and think those are Git submodules. And then you have a big problem. So that's why we try to keep those things ignored. All right. Okay, there's the Git deployment. As we talked about a little bit earlier, Composer can be a bit of a resource hog. Like Ryan, you were saying, it was taking 3 gigabytes to be able to run it. And, you know, you probably, you know, depending on what kind of resources you have, you probably don't want to run that on production all the time. So you kind of want to use a build server to create what they call it is an artifact. And then you deploy the artifact. So an artifact, doing the artifact thing, it adds a bunch of complexity to the deployment process, right? Because you're not just git pull, composer install, done. You are, okay, let's provision this thing over here to clone it and build it. And then we're going to take these files and we're going to put them on another server and all that stuff. So there's some benefits and some drawbacks for either way to do this. A good thing about having an artifact, especially if you commit that to a Git repo, is that you can add auditing. You can have a little bit of auditing on your production code. So say if supposedly your site got hacked or something and somebody modified the code on the production server, you do a git diff real quick and you'll see that, oh, that's different. That's not supposed to be the way it is. And also it reduces the resources required for the production server. So you don't have to have, you know, your VM or your container to allocate, you know, 5 gigs of memory in order to just run a composer script, right? When really all you need is like 2 gigs to host the website most of the time. And so that's, you know, that can be, you know, if you're running production on like the Amazon cloud or something, you're going to have a large instance sitting there that's only like 5% utilized for most of its time, and that's just wasting money. When you can get a small and you can build it on something else like Circle CI or Travis and just push it out to the production server, just the files. So that's kind of the idea behind Artifact. So yeah, I kind of went through the steps. You deploy to a build server, you run the composer install, and get all the packages and everything, and then you take the result of that and put it in a different branch or a totally different Git repository, or just rsync the files over.
Yeah.
to the production server.
If you put it in different Git repository, aren't you kind of eliminating one of the advantages of Composer, which was you didn't need to put all your Drupal stuff into a Git repository?
Yeah, that's right. And this is only for deployment, right? So it's, you know,
But,
when you're doing
but you
development,
deploy most of your,
yeah.
we,
So our
we
sync is
deploy most of our sites.
right. So rsync could be the way to go on that one, which is just copy the files over. But
Mhm.
having it in a Git repository gives you that ability to audit the code on production.
Yeah, and
But
I
then
can
you also
definitely
don't
see
have,
that.
but then you don't have all those extra commits of all these big files and stuff when you're doing development. So that's the trade-off there. So yeah, I don't think we do the artifacts thing right now for what we do. So it's
So
an-
you're running Composer on your production server?
I think so. I don't actually
Hey.
run that part, so I'm not exactly sure what happens, but I don't know if John knows what's going on with that. Magic. Yeah, okay.
That's at this point kind of what I'm planning on doing, at least initially.
Yeah,
is-
totally.
is running it.
I mean, if you've got a big hunk of iron sitting there not doing anything,
Mhm,
you know, you don't need to add that complexity, right?
mhm.
But yeah, but if you're running everything on Amazon, you got to be a little bit more lean. And so we see
Sure.
like, you know, the big development shops, big enterprises doing this artifact stuff because
Mhm.
it saves a lot of money. So what about private repositories? I've got this theme that I want to share across all of our company's websites. Or I've got this authentication module that's specific to our institution. I don't really want to put that up on Packagist and be public for anybody to grab so that
Right.
anybody can create an Iowa State website, so that anybody can create a state of Iowa website. You know, that we don't know. So we need a way to be able to, you know, manage those dependencies too. So there's, let's see here, how did I go through it? Okay, yeah. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can roll your own private packagist sort of service. And this thing called Satis is built by the people who build Composer, which is pretty good. It's an open source project. It's PHP, but you know, it requires some infrastructure. You need a server or a container or something that sits there and runs every few minutes to index all of your local projects in the versions and where everything is. So that's really good if, say, you want, if you have like a lot of projects,
Mhm.
right? And several teams working on different things all the time. But if you only have like 2 things, yeah, it's extra work, right? Though looking at the instructions for it, it looks pretty easy. Like I haven't done it, but because I have other more important things to do. But it looks like if I had to estimate myself, it would take me a couple hours to get one up and running. If I had
Mhm.
the server or whatever.
It sounds like something a development shop like Lullabot
Oh
or
yeah,
any of those would definitely want to do it.
yeah,
Right?
yep.
Okay.
So there's also a different way to do this, and this is called, I call it a project specific repo. I don't know where or how I figured out how to do this. Probably a mashing of different tutorials out there. But a project, so a dependency like say my module,
Mhm.
can also be a Composer repository itself. And so this is pretty easy to set up. You just add your stuff to your Composer JSON, and it mostly works. This can be cumbersome if you have too many of these dependencies to work on, right? So if you have like 100 of them, you have to have 100 different repositories. But yeah, this can be hosted on any Git repository. So I think this is the part where Brian wanted to figure out how to do. Was that your specific question?
Yeah, and I think I kind of figured it out, but I'm curious to see what you have and see if it's the same thing.
All right. So let's see here. Let's go here. I have a Drupal module that I did for this group a long time ago, 4 years ago. Just as an example, it's a Drupal 7 module, but I'm not going to actually run it and install it and run it as real
Right.
code, but we'll see how this works. But it's a Drupal module, and 4 hours ago here, I made a Composer JSON file. I added that to the project. And here we are. We got the name, and this matches with what GitHub has. Rearick, Drush example. If you're on Bitbucket, if you have a Bitbucket org called ISU extension, bitbucket.org/ISU extension/ whatever. Description, that's nice to have. It's type Drupal module. And this is important because that's what tells Composer what type of thing this is and where to put it. You might also want to call it, if you are ambitious and you don't want it to end up in the contrib folder, you can define another type, like, ISU module, like I talked about.
I
before.
tried that and I wasn't getting that. That's the part I wasn't getting working.
Okay. Right. I have an
so-
example of that working.
Okay.
But let's get through the presentation first, and we'll talk
Okay.
about that.
So I ended up doing Drupal custom.module, which is something that it already understood.
Interesting. Okay.
But then in the composer.json file of my Drupal site, I had to tell it where to install that.
Right.
So install this type in web modules custom.
Right. Yeah. So you can add homepage, whatever. And here's the repositories part. And yeah, I don't know why I needed to do this, but I get that repository stands in there. I say it's a Git repository and give it the URL to the Git repository. And then of course I define the Drupal's Composer repository, just in case, this module requires, actually this probably requires Drush, right? Because it's Drush commands, but whatever.
Yeah.
So if I had other dependencies, I could add them here. So that's a good kind of start. So this is what, say, you would put in your theme or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll go back to our local. Where am I? Let's go back to my site here. All right. I hope people can see this. There we go. Composer JSON. So this is our website now, our Composer JSON there. We've got a repository stanza here. We got the Drupal Composer repository, so it knows where to find Drupal Composer or Drupal projects. So how do we find our own project? So I'll add a comma there, put in a bunch of spaces. And I'm going to make this type. It's a Git. github.com:Rearick. No comma. Close that bracket. No comma there. Right? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Let's save that file. All right. So I just edited a Composer JSON. Did I do that right? Composer validate. All right. It says here, Composer JSON is valid. The lock file is not up to date. Let's ignore that for now, because it's suggesting, hey, you should run Composer update. And if you do that, you're going to get, everything's going to get updated at once. So careful with that. All right. So now let's go back and edit our JSON file. So we've got the repository. That's in there good. Now we have our requirement. So we can add it. I want to try and do it alphabetically here. So Rearick /drush example. And that's the name we gave it in the Composer JSON. And here I'm going to say, I just want the master branch, whatever is head at master. Because I don't have releases or anything like that. But if you do have releases or tags, you can define that here. And so if you tag with a semantic versioning, I think it works really well with defining the version of whatever you want. But it's just me and 2 other people. We know what's going on. Master is always good to go, right?
Always.
Right? So I'm going to save that. I'm going to validate it again. It says it's valid. We got the same thing with the lock file. And here it's warning you, hey, you're just seeing the master branch here. So tisk tisk, but I'll let you do it anyway. All right.
It's your own foot.
Yeah, it's your own foot. For the most part, if it's not moving fast, that's worked out pretty well.
Yep.
All right. So let's see here. We saw that. So now we need to update our lock file. So now I can say Composer update Rearick drush example. Go faster. There we go. All right, so it cloned something and put it there. So dev master at this commit ID, writing the log file, great. Get status. Okay, I just got the message from Lee that they are ready for the meeting. All right. So if we do a Composer validate, we don't have that scary warning. We just have the normal warning about the master branch. So great. So we take a look at the diff. We got the stuff we added in the Composer JSON, Composer lock file, the hash is updated, and here's all the meta information about what we got. And we see here that this is the specific commit from the repo that we're going to be using. All right, so it's going to check out that specific commit until you run
update.
Composer update Rearick Drupal drush example, and then that will update the commit there.
Cool.
And then you can commit that, push it,
Mm-hmm.
just like normal. Wow. This is a long one. All right. Here is the big feature of Composer that I really, truly love and makes it worth dealing with Composer. Is that it manages patches for you. It's so nice. Let me, I want to say a few things because with Drupal 8, things are moving so fast, and maybe sometimes things don't get committed or merged even into the development branch of a module or something very fast for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the patch is there. It's been RTBC'd for like 6 months. Let's just use it, right? So we can add that patch if we want to. So let's take a look at how to do that real quick. So we have an issue. This is one that I think Sarah and Angela were working on earlier. Something about some states on the Forms API in order to do some Ajax-y something or other, I don't know. But the big deal here is that it needs review. There's been lots of discussion, and it's been updated through a few versions of Drupal. And then here all the way onto comment 80 is the patch that everybody says it's working. It's working great. So we'll open that link in the new tab, get the URL. So here's the patch file. Let's copy that URL here. And let's go into our Composer JSON. Let's just add that stuff. All right. So we have this thing, Composer Patches. It's a nice plugin for Composer. We have that, so we have awesome stuff. So I can go all the way down to our extra area, and let's add some configuration in here. And I want a patches stanza. Let's close that before I forget. And I want a patch on Drupal core. And if you need it for a module or something, you define that module. Huh? Drupal, D-R-U. Thanks. That would have failed. I don't know if the validator would have caught that or not. I don't know. All right, so how many spaces are we doing here? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So we're gonna give it a nice line here. So let's say we're gonna give it the node ID. You know, whatever description you need. I usually like to have the node ID and kind of like a description of what the patch is. So node 1091852 comment 80, maybe just a hash 80. And then fix for Ajax. Right. So whatever you need to do to say, hey, this is what this patch is about. Maybe you want to put in a JIRA number, so EA 123 or whatever, so that you can track that patch. Like, okay, why did we have this?
Yeah.
How do we recreate the problem that this patch solves? If we remove the patch, how do we test to make sure that it, all that stuff?
Basically, that's documentation for you later to know why you have that patch there, correct?
Yep. And so now we're going to say, all right, that's the description of the patch, and we'll hit paste. And there's our patch. And close that. No comma. Comma. Okay. Composer validate. It's valid. So, okay, the log file is, we don't care about that one right now. All right, so now how do we get this patch onto Drupal? Well, let's update Drupal. Composer, update Drupal core. And now we don't need all the dependencies and stuff because we're just getting the patch, right? And hopefully there wasn't a release of Drupal while you were doing this. You should probably know when that happens, right? But so let's see what happens. Let me see here. It's grabbing the patch. It's removing Drupal core. It removes it, and then it's loading up repositories and stuff, checking up the dependencies and all that stuff. And then it's gonna grab it and apply the patch, hopefully. It's installing core, applying patches, writing lock file, and then these are the running the scripts that. All right, so you see when it's going there, it says installing patches for Drupal core. You see the patch name, you see the description, see the issue number, and it's good. If it failed, you'll see a failure.
Mhm.
Right. So that can happen. A failure can happen like, okay, Drupal was updated, this patch has been applied, and oh, the patch doesn't apply because it's already there, and I don't know what to do.
Or the merge conflict type thing where it can't figure out what line it's supposed
Yeah.
to change and
Yep.
stuff like that, right?
Yep. And so at that point, you're like, all right, let's go take a look at that issue.
Yep.
Okay, there's a new patch. Great, thank you. Or
Mhm.
or you have to figure it out yourself. So
Mhm.
that's some of the caveats of using patches. Is
Exactly.
you gotta maintain them.
Yep. And that's going to happen whether you're using Composer or not. You still
Correct,
have to
yeah.
figure that stuff out.
Yep. But Composer will tell
But
you.
Composer does all this, which is really cool.
Yeah. All right. Patch management. So that's so easy. I love that part. That makes Composer worth everything. And I finally reached the end here. So that's a bunch of resources I've put together here.
How many patches do you, on a Drupal 8 site, do you have approximately?
2 core patches right now, I think, and 1 contrib patch.
Okay. Yeah. We usually don't have or do too many, but every once in a while.
Yeah.
Like in Drupal 7, there was something with the date set, with the date module that
Oh
we
yeah,
had to
yeah.
apply a
We
patch
still
for.
have that on Drupal 7.
And I couldn't tell you what sites we have it applied and which ones we don't. Where with this, I could,
Yeah, it's nice.
which is cool.
It automatically reapplies the patch for you. You don't have to think about it
Mhm.
unless it fails or it doesn't work.
Or like on our Drupal 6 site where we had to hack core, we could on our own patch and
Oh yeah.
not have to remember, oh yeah, I have to go in and change this line again to make this part work.
All right. So were there any questions, comments? Did we answer your question?
Yeah. In the composer.json file on your Drush example module, you had the repositories in there as well.
Yeah.
Is that necessary?
I'm not sure. I think maybe it is because I was trying to do it so many different ways, and like it doesn't make sense. And then eventually, this way worked.
Okay.
So you can try not putting it in there and seeing what happens. But
Okay. And then I have another question, and it's probably more of a Apache question, which is go to your website. So was it my site /web/ whatever? How would I get rid of the web in that URL? So I just want it to be my site /or. I don't want
oh, right.
all of my site to be accessible, web accessible. I only want the web folder to be web accessible. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in your Apache config, I usually use an alias.
Okay.
Or if it's like a root site, it's you define that specific path as doc root
To the root, to
to
the
web
web
root, yeah.
rather than to
to the
my
project
site.
root. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. But if it's a sub-site like the way that we're doing a lot, and I think you guys are too, right?
Yeah.
You use a alias in the
In the HTTP config.
okay.
Yeah. John knows more about that, but
We're doing that on the server. I was having a little bit of trouble on my Mac getting that to work, but
I just ignore it. I mean, it really doesn't matter to me whether there's like a web there, because I can go there and whatever, I can see the license and
Mhm.
drush folder vendor.
Yeah.
As a development box, this is
Yeah.
only accessible by me
Right.
on my local box or via my VPN.
Right. But on my production server, I don't want that extra step in there.
That's the whole idea of having a separate document root in the project,
right.
is so that you can do stuff like put config in a inaccessible place.
Okay.
Any questions or comments in Des Moines?
Well done, sir. Have any experience using this with a Docker container or a Doxel?
I think it's about the same, right? It's kind of, there's more, I don't know, containers are, it's a completely different layer of the stack, I think, so.
Instead of checking it into a Git repo, you might just take it to your container.
I was just curious.
Other than it's a change in process, do you see any downsides of using Composer?
It's, the learning curve.
Yeah.
But once you get used to it and the flow of it, you end up working better and faster, I think.
Yeah. Another thing I like about it when I started looking at it more is it seems like you have more control over what version of the modules you have.
Yes.
Because right now, if we spun up a site 3 months ago and then we spin up another one today, if there's not security updates, we probably didn't update modules on the old site. So then we have different versions of modules on all our different sites, where being able to have more control over that looks like a huge advantage.
Well, you'd have to do that for each site, right? You'd have to Composer, like each site, it's its own Composer site.
Right.
So you'd have to update the modules on each site with Composer still, but that process is easier.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And I'm assuming we can do it kind of the same way we've done with our luggage sites, where we have one master repo that we do a lot of those updates on, and then
yeah.
sync them on Bitbucket and then run Composer
Right.
install on
That-
on each site.
Yeah, so the composer.lock file really should only be project specific, right? Because like if you have it on several different sites that have like different modules installed, you're not going to want to try and merge that lock file. So,
Oh,
Josh and Nick were having this problem. That's the problem they were talking about earlier. Upgrading SiteMaster to the latest of what we have in IAC 8 is that composer lock file is different.
oh yeah, basically merge conflicts
Yeah, so
all over the
because
place.
there's different modules on this site as on
Mhm.
the faculty sites or whatever.
What you're listing on that
So
website. I don't know why you see it.
not
Doesn't
you know
limit that
not using the composer JSON
structure.
from the other project or the composer lock file from the other project is probably good. So it keeps its own, each site has its own lock file. And then you'd have to manually, keep all those up to date. But
With the
have
website,
all the
there's
exact
total,
same modules everywhere.
what kind of things to do
And
with
I
it.
think that's
great.
fine.
Oh, that's true.
It's allow option, something like that.
But you can also be very specific in your composer JSON file and say only this version and only specifically that version. So like if you
Right.
don't put that caret in there, you can say this is going to stay here at
Mhm.
this version all the time. So
Until you specifically say update to the next version.
until you go into the JSON file
Or-
and say get rid of that caret or type in the other version number or composer require version number. When you say composer update, it's going by the constraints of the composer JSON file.
Okay.
So if you said,
So,
the
so if
token
I,
module needs to be at version 1.1, there's no caret, you're never going to get an update for that module
until I do
until you do a composer require
token
Drupal token
2.0 or
to,
whatever.
1.5 or whatever.
Whatever I
or,
want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or without a thing. And
Okay.
it'll get the caret in there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, the
being
lock
that
file.
you don't have the dependencies in your upstream repository,
Mhm.
your other sites are free to do whatever. You don't have to worry about this. We're forcing this specific version of the theme on this site. You say, okay, we're gonna do something else. We're gonna fork the theme and make it
It's interesting how the videos today.
break it away from the normal lock and step
Yeah.
of the rest of the sites. But then of course, that means more management. So
Mhm.
there's trade-offs for that. And that's always going to be the case. And there's no technical way to get around that because
Mhm.
you don't know, what's going to come down the line and what modules you're going to need for what. So, and that's the other thing. I don't think Composer is something that will notify you if there's like a security update or anything like that. It just manages the packages. So right, yeah, you can't just say Composer update security or something. You need to pay attention to the modules and look in your Drupal update list on the site and say, oh, okay, yeah, that needs updated and that needs updated.
Which is pretty much what we're doing today. So that and watching the emails
the
that we
email
get
list, yeah.
from Drupal.
Yeah. I have to say, being able to define a specific version is something we're missing right now in Drupal 7 right now, because we have the bean module, and the latest version of the bean module has a bug that breaks something for us. So we have to manually say, drush DL, bean whatever version. And if we had that in the Composer JSON to say, I only want bean version 1.11, and I don't want
And force it to be that.
and force it to be
version.
that version,
Yeah.
then you don't have to worry about it. We just install it.
Mhm.
Won't you know, if you update modules and stuff, you got kind of have a safeguard from doing that. And then once we see that, oh, okay, either A, there's a patch for it and we can apply it as a patch, or B, we can, install the updated version and put the carrot back in.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of flexibility, lots of power, lots of complicated. But there's a system.
Yeah, once I started looking at it, I realized that. That it wasn't there just to add complexity.
Any other questions or comments? Not necessarily have to be Composer related.
You have anything, John? I think we're good here. Like I say, I think you did a great job.
Okay.